Somewhere out there, a man sits laughing on his couch with his whole family gathered around him, and a quiet theory says every single one of them is dead, and he is the only one who never noticed. That man is Peter Griffin. The show is Family Guy, the loudest, silliest cartoon most people can name, the one that plays in the background while dinner gets made. It is the last show on Earth anyone would ever call frightening, and that is exactly why it works so well as a hiding place. For years, fans have been turning that bright, noisy show over in the dark and finding things underneath it. A family that might be imagined, a town where no one can truly die, a friend who came back wrong, a neighbor nobody should trust. None of them are made up on the spot. Each one is built on something the show actually put on the screen. Welcome to Red Umbrella. Let's get started. The world inside Peter's head. For most of the people who grew up with Family Guy, the show is the opposite of scary. It is the thing that plays in the background while dinner gets made. It is loud and fast and silly. A man falls down a flight of stairs and groans for a full minute. A giant chicken shows up out of nowhere and starts a fight that drags on and on across a whole city. A baby talks like a tiny grown man, and a dog drinks at the bar and writes books that nobody reads. Nothing about any of it seems built to sit with a person in the dark. And yet there is one idea about this show, passed around quietly for more than 10 years now, that takes all of that noise and turns it into something slow and heavy. The idea does not change a single thing you see on the screen. It only changes the reason behind it. Once it settles into someone's head, the loud parts and the silly parts start to feel like a blanket thrown over something underneath, something sad. Something the show may have been carrying the whole time without ever saying it out loud. The theory is short and plain when you first hear it. The Griffin family is dead. All of them, except Peter. The town of Quahog, the house on Spooner Street, the wife and the kids and the talking dog. All of it is a world that Peter built inside his own mind so he would not have to wake up in a world where his family is gone. That is the whole thing. It sounds almost too simple, but the people who believe it have filled in the space around it with a kind of careful, gentle, awful detail, and the detail is what makes it stick. Here is the version of the story the theory tells. In the real world, the one before the cartoon begins, the Griffins are an ordinary family. Meg is not the punching bag of the house. She is a pretty, well-liked teenage girl, the kind of daughter parents are proud of. Chris is not just a goofy kid. In the real world, he was born with something wrong, the result of not getting enough air when he came into the world, and so his mind never fully caught up. Meg loves her brother anyway. She looks out for him. One night, she takes him along to a party, the way an older sister might when she does not want to leave him behind. At the party, things go wrong in the quietest possible way. Meg drinks too much. Chris, surrounded by noise and strangers, starts to panic. Meg, wanting to get her brother home and safe, gets behind the wheel of a car she should not have been driving. The drive does not end at the house. There is a crash. Both of them die on the road, the popular sister and the gentle brother, in the same moment. What happens next is the part that gives the theory its weight. Lois, their mother, is pregnant at the time, carrying the baby who would have been Stewie. The grief is more than she can hold. She does not survive it either, and neither does the child she was carrying. And so, in a single stretch of days, Peter Griffin loses every single person in his family. The daughter, the son, the wife, the baby who never got the chance to be born. A man can break under that. The theory says Peter did. Left alone with all of it, his mind did the only thing it could think of to keep him alive. It refused to let them go. It rebuilt them. It put the whole family back together inside his head and gave them a house and a town and 100 small ordinary mornings, and it kept the story running so that Peter would never have to sit in the silence of an empty home. That is why, the theory says, the show looks the way it looks. Think about how the family treats Meg. In the cartoon, she is mocked, ignored, blamed, pushed aside by her own parents and brothers for no reason that ever quite makes sense. The show plays it for laughs, over and over, year after year. But under this theory, the meanness has a source. Meg was the one driving the car. Somewhere underneath all the invented happiness, a part of Peter blames her for the crash that took the children, and that blame leaks into the made-up world as cruelty he cannot fully explain or stop. He does not even know he is doing it. The fantasy is not perfect. The grief seeps through the cracks. Then there is Stewie. In the show, Stewie is a baby who speaks in long, clever sentences, builds machines, and seems far smarter than everyone around him. Under this theory, that makes a strange kind of sense too. Stewie is the child who never got to be born. Peter never met him, never watched him grow, never found out who he would become. So the mind builds him as pure possibility, a baby with no limits at all, brilliant and capable of anything, because a father who lost a child before meeting him has nothing to picture future except everything that child might have been. And the talking dog. Brian drinks. Brian is lonely in a way the show keeps returning to even when it is making jokes. Brian is the one Peter talks to when things get quiet, the one who understands, the steady voice at the side of the story. A dog is the kind of companion a grieving man might lean on. The theory suggests Brian is the part of Peter that still thinks clearly, given a body and a seat at the table, so Peter is never truly alone in the house he built. There is one more piece, and it is maybe the most important one. In the world of the show, nothing ever sticks. Peter does terrible things, dangerous things, things that would ruin a real person's life, and by the next episode, it is all wiped clean and forgotten. Houses get destroyed and stand again. People get hurt and walk it off. The whole town resets itself every week as if nothing happened. In an ordinary story, that is just how cartoons work. Under this theory, it is something else. There are no real consequences because none of it is real. A fantasy does not have to obey the rules. Inside Peter's head, things can always go back to the way they were, because the entire point of the place is that nothing bad is allowed to be permanent. The one permanent bad thing already happened, out in the real world, before the show ever started. Everything after is the mind, making sure it never happens again. Now, all of that could be dismissed as a sad story that fans made up, a clever piece of fiction laid on top of a comedy. And for a long time, that is mostly what it was. But the theory has one anchor that is not made up at all. One piece that the show itself put on the screen, and it is the reason this idea refuses to die. There is a real episode of Family Guy from the 4th season with the title Petarded. In it, the family is playing a board game, and Lois quietly hands Peter the easy children's questions so he can feel good about himself. Peter wins and decides he must be a genius. Brian, tired of the bragging, dares him to take a serious test, the kind used to find truly gifted minds. Peter takes it. The results come back, and they are not what he expected. The test shows in plain terms that Peter is not smart at all. It declares him intellectually disabled. The show does not treat this as a guess or a joke that gets taken back later. It is stated outright on the record as a fact about who Peter is. For people who believe the theory, that moment is everything. The show itself is telling everyone, right there in an ordinary episode, that the man at the center of this world does not think the way most people think. His mind does not work the way a typical mind works. And if the whole story is being held together inside that mind, then the strangeness of the world starts to feel less like random comedy and more like the honest shape of a mind that is struggling. A mind that builds a place where the impossible is normal, where a baby is a genius, and a dog can talk, and nothing painful is ever allowed to last, might be exactly the kind of mind the show already told everyone Peter has. That single episode turns the theory from a sad fan story into something that feels like it might have been planned. It almost certainly was not, but it does not feel that way at 2 in the morning. The idea did not come from the people who make the show. It came from a regular person on the internet. It was first written out and posted on a website called Reddit back in the year 2012, on a page where people share their theories about movies and shows. For years it lived there, known to fans of the show but not really beyond them. Then, in late 2022, it found a second life. It spread across short videos online where people would film themselves telling others to go look it up, calling it disturbing, daring their friends to read the whole thing before bed. It became one of those stories that gets passed from person to person in the dark, the kind that changes how you see something you thought you already knew. What makes it land is not blood or jump scares. There is nothing loud about it. The horror, if you want to call it that, is quiet and ordinary. It lives in the gap between what the show looks like and what the theory says is underneath. A man laughing on the couch while his made-up family laughs with him, because the real ones are gone, and laughing is the only way he has found to keep them close. The same scenes that made a kid laugh become, under this reading, the saddest thing a grown man could possibly be doing. And the show never has to change a single frame for that to be true. The viewer just has to know. It is worth being honest about what this is and what it is not. The people who make Family Guy have never said this is real. The show has never confirmed it, never even hinted that it meant for any of this to be true. By every official account, it is a theory, made up by fans, built on top of a comedy that was only ever trying to make people laugh. The crash, the deaths, the broken mind, none of that is written anywhere in the show as a plain fact. It is a story about the story. But the best of these quiet, creeping theories work by using only what is already there. They do not ask anyone to believe in anything new. They just ask a person to look at the same old thing from a slightly different angle, and once they do, they cannot fully look away. The meanness toward Meg was always on the screen. The genius baby baby was always on the screen. The dog who drinks. The world that never holds a consequence. The man the show itself called slow. All of it was always there, in plain view, for years. The theory does not add a single thing. It only lines those pieces up and asks what kind of picture they make when you stop laughing for a second. That is the strange power of it. It takes the loudest, silliest show many people can name and makes it whisper. And it leaves behind a question that is hard to shake, the kind that sits in the chest long after the screen goes dark. If a whole world really can be built inside one person's mind to keep the grief away, then how would anyone watching ever be able to tell the difference between a story that is happening and a story that is only being dreamed? Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. That question does not stop with Peter, because there is another member of that family the fans have come to suspect, another mind that some believe the entire show might secretly belong to. And the strange thing about this next one is that the show keeps leaving clues about it on purpose, hidden inside a small mystery that has been sitting in the corner of Family Guy since the very first episode. Section 2. The World Through Stewie's Eyes. There is a small mystery sitting in the middle of Family Guy that has never once been solved, and most people who watch the show have felt it without ever stopping to name it. It is the question of the baby. Stewie Griffin is barely a year old. He still sits in a high chair and wears footed pajamas and gets carried around by his mother, and he talks. He talks in long, clean, full sentences, better than most of the grown people around him. He plans, he argues, he builds machines in his bedroom. The strange part is not only that he can speak, the strange part is that no one can seem to agree on whether anyone else can actually hear him. Watch closely across the seasons, and the rules keep sliding around. Brian, the dog, understands every word Stewie says, always, without fail. The two of them hold long conversations, go on trips together, argue like old friends, but the rest of the family is a puzzle. Sometimes Lois answers something Stewie said as if she heard it plainly. Other times, Stewie will stand right in front of her and announce, out loud, that he is planning to kill her, and she will smile and bounce him on her knee like he made a cute little baby noise. Peter sometimes responds to him, and sometimes acts like the baby is just gurgling. Chris seems to get it now and then. Meg almost never does, except for the times she suddenly does. None of it lines up. A person could try to draw a chart of who can hear the baby and who cannot, and the chart would fall apart within a few episodes, because the show simply does not hold to one answer. Stewie threatens his mother's life on a regular basis, in the open, at the dinner table, and the threats land on deaf ears almost every single time. Then, every so often, a character will react to him as if he is a normal speaking person, and the moment passes and the world goes back to pretending the baby cannot really be understood at all. The show knows it is doing this. That is the part that turns a small mystery into something stranger. In one episode named Big Fat, a character visiting from a completely different cartoon ends up dreaming that he is Peter Griffin, living inside the Griffin house for a while. When he finally wakes up out of the dream, he says something that sounds like a quiet joke, but feels like the writers tipping their hand. He says that he always wakes up before he can find out whether the family can actually understand the baby. The people who make the show put that line in on purpose. They were telling everyone watching that even they treat the question as a riddle with no ending, a thing that gets dangled forever and never gets answered. The man who created the show has been asked about it more than almost anything else. By his own account, the question of who can understand Stewie is the single thing fans bring up to him most often, the one that comes up again and again, no matter where he goes. And the strange thing is that even he has not given one steady answer to it. At different times, he has said different things. Once he explained it by saying that everyone in the family really can hear and understand Stewie perfectly well, and the reason they never react is simply that he is a baby, so they do not take a single word he says seriously. They hear the threats and the speeches and the grand plans, and they brush them off as baby talk, the way a parent might nod along to a toddler babbling in a stroller. But then, at a large gathering of fans years later, he gave a different version. That time, he laid out a set of rules. Brian always understands Stewie. Chris understands him once in a while. Peter, Lois, and Meg do not understand him at all. It sounded clear and settled until he added the catch. He admitted those were not firm rules. He said the writers break them whenever a joke needs breaking, bending who can hear the baby to fit whatever the scene happens to need that week. So the closest thing to an official answer comes with a built-in shrug. There are rules, except when there are not, and the man who made the show is comfortable leaving it that way. For most shows, an unanswered question like that would just be a loose thread, the kind of thing fans argue about and then forget. But a certain group of viewers looked at the sliding rules, the baby who is smarter than everyone, one, the world that bends around him, and came to a different conclusion. Their idea is that the reason the rules never hold is because the whole show is being seen through Stewie's eyes, not Peter's, the baby's. Every episode of Family Guy, by this theory, is the world the way a 1-year-old understands it, dreamed up and stretched out by an imagination that does not yet know what is real and what is not. Once that idea is in place, the strangeness starts to settle into a kind of order. A baby does not understand the rules of the world. A baby does not know who can hear what, or how big things really are, or what is possible and what is impossible. So a story told from inside a baby's mind would have exactly the shape Family Guy has. The wild events that come out of nowhere, the giant chicken, the trips through time, the things that could never happen happening every week. All of that is the size a baby's imagination would blow the world up to. The grown-ups would not look like real grown-ups. They would look like the oversized, simple shapes a small child sorts people into. Look at the family again through that lens. Peter becomes the big, loud, foolish one, the father who waves his arms around and does silly things to make the baby laugh. So in the baby's mind, he turns into a bumbling giant who is always falling down and getting into trouble. Lois becomes the one who says no. She is the mother who takes things away, who puts the baby down for naps he does not want, who controls when he eats and sleeps and where he can go. From inside the helpless feeling of being a baby, the person who controls your whole day can start to feel like an enemy. And so in this dreamed up world, Lois becomes the one Stewie is forever plotting against, the rival he says he wants to be rid of. And Brian becomes the friend, the one who listens, the one who always, always understands. Because a child needs at least one person in the world who hears them, and the baby gives that gift to the dog. It even explains the talking. A baby's mind does not draw a hard line between what is real and what is imagined. Inside that mind, the baby would be able to speak in perfect sentences because that is how the baby experiences his own thoughts, big and clear and grown up, even though out in the real world, only babbling comes out of his mouth. That gap is the whole answer to the mystery. The reason the family cannot understand Stewie is that in the real world, there is nothing to understand yet. He is a baby making baby sounds. The long speeches and the clever plans live only in his head, which is the same place the entire show lives. So of course the rules slide. A baby cannot keep a rule straight. The world keeps changing shape because it is being held together by a mind that is still brand new. There is a sadder layer underneath this one, the kind of thing that gives a quiet theory its weight late at night. Under this reading, the brilliant, scheming, powerful Stewie that everyone knows is not really who Stewie is. He is who Stewie imagines himself to be. In real life, a baby is one of the most helpless things alive. He cannot walk far, cannot feed himself, cannot make a single choice about his own day, cannot get anyone to truly listen. So the mind builds the opposite. It builds a version of the baby who is a genius, who has machines and weapons and plans, who could take over the entire world if he felt like it, who answers to no one. The endless plots to get rid of his mother stop being the jokes they look like and become something smaller and more human. They are the oversized feelings of a tiny person who has no power at all, swollen up into a daydream where he holds all of it. The grandness is the wish. The helplessness is the truth. That is the soft horror of it. The funniest, most confident character in the whole show might be the loneliest, dreaming himself bigger than he is because the real version is so small and so unheard. As with the story about Peter, honesty matters here. The people who make Family Guy have never stood up and said that the show is secretly told through the baby's eyes. It has never been confirmed as the true frame of the series. It is a theory, built by fans, laid carefully on top of a comedy. The makers would likely say the truth is far simpler, that Stewie talks because a talking baby is funny and strange, and helps the show stand apart from every other cartoon family, and that the question of who can hear him stays open because keeping it open makes for better jokes. That plain answer is almost certainly the real one. But the theory has something most theories never get. It answers the one question the show itself has refused to answer for decades. And it does more than that. It explains why the show keeps poking at that question on purpose, dropping lines like the one in the Dream episode, daring the audience to notice that no one will ever tell them the rule. A show that wanted everyone to forget the mystery would simply stop bringing it up. Family Guy keeps bringing it up. It keeps the riddle alive. And a riddle that the writers refuse to close is exactly the kind of empty space a theory can move into and live in for years. Set the two ideas side by side, and something quietly unsettling appears. The first first theory says the whole world of the show might be folded up inside Peter's mind, built out of grief, kept running so a broken man never has to face an empty house. This second theory says the whole world might be folded up inside the baby's mind instead, built out of a small, helpless creature's enormous imagination. Two different members of the same family, two different skulls, but the same exact shape underneath. A complete world, a whole town, dozens of people, and years of stories, all of it tucked away inside one single head. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Both of those ideas hide the strangeness somewhere private, locked away behind one person's eyes. But there is a third theory that does the opposite. It does not hide the strangeness inside anyone. It says the strangeness is real and shared, and that every single person in the town is living inside it together. By that theory, the reason no one in Quahog can ever truly be hurt, the reason the dead keep coming back and the town puts itself back together week after week, is that the place is not really a town at all. And the strongest clue, the believers say, is the one quiet visitor the show keeps sending to that town, again and again. A guest who shows up so often that he might as well live there. Section 3. The town that cannot die. Something is wrong with the town of Quahog, and the wrongness is so steady, so woven into every episode, that most people stop seeing it. The wrongness is this: nothing there ever stays broken. Nobody there ever stays hurt. The very worst things happen, week after week, and then the next episode begins, and the town is whole again. The people are fine again, and not one of them seems to remember that anything happened at all. The Griffin House gets destroyed more times than anyone could count. It burns, it floods, it gets torn apart, it gets blown up, and it is always standing again by the next story, clean and ordinary, as if the damage simply rolled off the world like water. People in that town fall from great heights and stand back up. They get hit by cars, shot, crushed, set on fire, and they walk it off. Peter alone has gone through enough to end a normal man 100 times over, and he is always back on the couch the following week, whole and laughing, the whole thing forgotten. Plenty of cartoons do a version of this. A show has to keep going, so the world gets tidied up between episodes and nobody asks too many questions. But in Quahog, the resetting runs so deep, and the things people survive are so far past what a living body could take, that a certain group of viewers stopped treating it as a normal cartoon shortcut. They started treating it as a clue. A clue that the place itself is not what it pretends to be. The strongest piece of that clue is a quiet visitor the show keeps sending to the town. He is a real character, one who has been turning up since the early days, and he is the Grim Reaper himself. In Family Guy, Death is a person, a tall figure in a dark hooded cloak who arrives whenever someone is supposed to die, to collect them and take them wherever they go next. He has a voice, a personality, a whole life of his own, and he comes to this one small town again and again and again. The first time the show puts him front and center is in an episode where Peter gets stuck with a giant hospital bill he does not want to pay. To get out of it, Peter lies on a form, writing down that he has died, hoping the debt will simply vanish. Telling the world you are dead, it turns out, has a cost. The lie reaches the one who handles the dead, and death comes knocking at the Griffin House to collect the man who claimed to be gone. There is a mix-up because Peter is plainly still alive, and in the middle of it all, Death ends up chasing Peter, trips, and hurts his ankle. What happens next is the part that should feel stranger than it does. Death cannot walk well, so he stays at the Griffin House to rest and recover. He sits on their couch. He wears a borrowed sweatsuit. He becomes, for a little while, a house guest, the way a neighbor might if they twisted an ankle on the front steps. And because the work of collecting the dead still has to be done while he heals, Peter borrows the cloak and the long curved blade and goes out to do the reaping himself. The end of all living things lounges in the living room while a fat man from Rhode Island takes over the duties of the afterlife. The show plays it as a normal week. There is more. Death, in the show, lives with his mother. He is a bit of a mama's boy. He has trouble talking to women. He is the one who comes for human beings when their time is up. And there is a small detail the show worked out that says a lot, which is that when an animal dies, Death does not come himself. He sends his dog instead. He has rules and a routine and a home life, and his routine keeps bringing him back to Quahog over and over until he is less like a rare and terrible event and more like a familiar face who is always somewhere nearby. The theory takes all of this and arrives at a single cold idea. Quahog is not an ordinary town. It is a waiting place, a spot that sits between being alive and whatever comes after, the kind of in-between place some people call a waiting room for souls. By this reading, the people of Quahog are not really living their lives at all. They are stuck. They are somewhere past the end, repeating a small, ordinary existence that never never truly moves forward, and they do not know it. Once that idea takes hold, the wrongness of the town turns into the most natural thing in the world. Why can no one truly die there? Because they are already on the other side of dying. Why does nothing ever have lasting weight? No injury, no disaster, no terrible mistake, because none of it is happening to living bodies that the rules of life still apply to. Why does death himself keep turning up like a regular, treating the place like a second home, sprawling on the couch in a borrowed sweatsuit? Because the whole town sits right at the edge of his world. He is not visiting from far away. He is practically a local. This is the same clue the very first theory leaned on, seen through a different door. The story about Peter pointed at the fact that nothing in the show has consequences, and said it proved the world was a fantasy inside a grieving man's head. This theory looks at the exact same fact, the endless resetting, the bodies that cannot stay broken, and reads it another way entirely. The lack of consequences is not a dream. It is what a waiting place past the end of life would feel like from the inside, a place where nothing can be lost because everything is already gone. Same clue, different answer waiting behind it. The believers point to something else too, something quieter and harder to shake. The people of Quahog never grow. They never age. They never get out. The Griffin children have been the exact same age for more than 20 years. Meg has been a teenager for over 2 decades. Stewie has been a baby that whole time. Nobody graduates and leaves for good. Nobody grows old. Nobody's life ever truly changes shape and stays changed. In a normal cartoon, that is just how things are, because the show needs its characters to stay the same so the jokes keep working. Under this theory, it becomes the saddest detail of all. The reason no one ever moves forward is that no one can. They are trapped. They are stuck in a single, small stretch of existence, living the same kind of day forever. And the endless jokes and chaos are the thing that keeps them from ever sitting still long enough to notice the door has no handle on their side. And then there is Brian. The show actually did this. It killed the family dog in an episode where he is struck by a car and dies on the table while the family weeps around him. The grief was real on the screen. They mourned him. They got a new dog to try to fill the empty space. And then, not long after, Brian simply came back, pulled out of death, and returned to his old seat at the table as if a door had swung open and shut. In the world most people live in, death is the one thing that does not undo itself. In this town, it turned out to be a thing that could be reversed, a coming and going rather than an ending. For people who believe the town is a waiting place, that was not a plot twist. That was the town behaving exactly the way the theory says it should. Death there is a revolving thing, not a final one. It is only fair to say the plain truth out loud. The people who make Family Guy have never said that Quahog is a waiting room for the dead. They have never hinted that the town sits at the edge of the afterlife. By every honest account, the town resets because the show has to keep running for hundreds of episodes, and a place where everything healed itself every week is simply the easiest way to keep telling stories. Death is a character because a hooded reaper who lives with his mother and gets cranky and twists his ankle is a funny idea, and the writers liked having him around. The characters never age because cartoon characters almost never do. That ordinary explanation is real, and it is probably the true one. But the theory holds on, the way the best of these do, because every single piece of it is something the show actually put on the screen. The town really does undo all its damage. The people really do survive what should kill them. Brian really did die and really did come back. And the Grim Reaper really does treat that one small town like a place he knows well, dropping in so often that he could almost have a key to the front door. Set all of those true things in a row and a picture forms. And the picture is of a place that sits one quiet step closer to the end than any of the people inside it realize. 3 of these theories now share the same strange shape. Each one takes the loudest, silliest cartoon a person could name and finds something hushed and sad folded up underneath it. The first put the whole world inside a broken father's mind. The second put it inside a helpless baby's imagination. This third one leaves the world out in the open, real and shared, but slides the entire town one step past living into a place no one can leave. Different ideas every time, and yet they keep arriving at the same feeling, that the cheerful surface is sitting on top of something that has to do with loss. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. But the strangest story tied to this show is not a theory about the show at all. It does not live inside the cartoon. It does not belong to Peter, or to the baby, or to the town. It belongs to the real world, to a real person, to the man who dreamed up every bit of it. And it begins on an ordinary morning in early September in a real airport with a real flight he was supposed to be on, in a place that came within a few short minutes of ending his life long before the rest of the world ever met the Griffins. Section 4. The Plane He Missed. This story leaves the cartoon behind. There is no theory to argue over here, no clue hidden in an old episode, no question about what is real. Every part of what follows happened in the waking world to a real person on one ordinary morning that started like any other and became one of the worst days the world has ever known. The person is Seth MacFarlane. He is the man who made Family Guy. He drew the family, wrote their first words, and gave most of them their voices, including Peter and Stewie and Brian, the talking baby and the talking dog, and the loud, foolish father, all coming out of the same throat. In the years since, his show has become one of the biggest and most famous cartoons on the planet. But on the morning this story takes place, none of that had happened yet. The show had only been on the air a short while. It was struggling. It was close to being canceled, far from the giant it would later become. Almost no one watching at the time would have guessed it would still be running decades on. The morning was the 11th of September in the year 2001. The night before, MacFarlane had gone back to the art school where he had once been a student up in the Northeast to give a talk to the people there. After the talk, he did what a lot of people do after a long evening of being the center of attention. He went out. He had drinks with some of the faculty, the older folks from the school, and he stayed up later than he should have, and the drinks added up. By the time he got to bed, he was not in any shape for an early start. He had a flight to catch in the morning, a trip from Boston back home to Los Angeles, and he woke up slow and heavy and hungover, the way anyone does after a night like that. There was a second problem waiting for him, and it had nothing to do with the drinking. The person who had booked his travel had made a small mistake. The piece of paper with his flight details on it listed the wrong departure time. It said the plane left a little later than it truly did, so in his head, fuzzy and tired as it was, he believed he had more time than he actually had. He moved through the morning at the pace of a man who thinks he is fine, while the real clock ran faster than the one in his hand. By the time he reached the airport and made his way to the gate, the gap between the time he thought he had and the time he really had caught up with him. He arrived about 10 minutes too late. He went up to the counter and told the woman there that he was booked on the flight. She looked and told him he had missed it. The gate was already closed. The plane was getting ready to leave without him. There was nothing she could do. He took it the way most people take a missed flight, with a shrug, a little annoyance maybe, the ordinary frustration of a traveler whose morning has gone sideways. He told her he would simply catch a later flight, the next one out. Then he went to wait the way travelers wait. He found a quiet spot in the airport lounge, and being tired and worn down from the night before, he closed his eyes and fell asleep. He slept for about 45 minutes. When he woke, the room was not quiet anymore. There was noise, movement, people gathering and staring at screens, the particular kind of stir that means something terrible has happened somewhere. He came up out of his nap into the middle of it and slowly understood what everyone was looking at. A plane had flown into one of the towers of the World Trade Center in New York. As he watched, a second plane struck the other tower, and then came the part that turned a distant horror into something personal. The reports named the first flight, the one that had hit the North Tower. It was American Airlines Flight 11, the plane out of Boston, bound for Los Angeles, the exact flight he had been booked on. The flight he had missed by about 10 minutes because of a hangover and a wrong time printed on a slip of paper. Everyone aboard Flight 11 was killed. There were no survivors on that plane. Had his head been clearer the night before, had the person booking his trip typed the right time, he would have been in a seat on that aircraft. He would have been one of the names. Instead, he was asleep in a lounge, missing it all by a handful of minutes, alive for reasons no larger than bad luck the night before, turning into the only luck that mattered the morning after. There is a strange footnote to that flight, one that has been reported many times since. Another man, an actor who years later would become MacFarlane's friend and would star in one of his films, was also said to have held a ticket on that same plane and to have changed his plans the day before and not gotten on. The same flight, brushed past by more than one person who would go on to make things the world would later know. A single plane that several lives came within a breath of ending on, and somehow did not. In the years that followed, MacFarlane has spoken about that morning in interviews more than once. He has told the story of the night out, the drinks, the wrong time on the itinerary, the slow trip to the gate, the woman at the counter telling him he was too late, the nap in the lounge, and waking to learn what the flight he missed had become. He has never dressed it up as destiny, or claimed he was saved for some grand reason. He simply tells what happened, plainly, the way a person tells the one story from their life that does not feel quite real, even to them. Here is where a theory finally enters, 4 years down the road. In 2005, the show put out a feature-length movie all about Stewie. In that movie, the baby has a brush with death of his own. He comes close to being killed, a near miss that shakes him, and the heart of the story becomes his quest to fix it. Stewie gets his hands on a way to travel through time, and he uses it to go back to the moment that nearly ended him, to step into the past and rewrite the day so that the deadly thing never happens at all. When he finally pulls it off, when he reaches back and undoes the danger and saves himself, he cries out in triumph, thrilled that he has done it, that he has reached into a fixed and frightening moment and bent it to a different ending. A group of fans looked at that movie and then looked at what they knew about the man who made it and saw something underneath. Their idea is that the movie is McFarlane quietly working through his own near miss. A man who came within 10 minutes of dying on a plane wrote a story about a small version of himself who goes back in time to make sure the deadly day never lands. The wish at the center of that movie, to reach into the past and pull yourself out of harm's way before the worst can happen, is exactly the wish a person might carry forever after surviving something they were never supposed to survive. By this reading, he handed that impossible wish to a cartoon baby with a time machine and let the baby do on screen the thing no living person can ever actually do. As always, honesty matters. McFarlane has never said the movie was about that morning. He has never said Stewie's trip through time was meant to stand in for his own escape from Flight 11. The near miss is not a theory. It is settled, documented fact, told by the man himself and never once in doubt. The link to the movie is the part fans built, reading a man's life into the story he chose to tell. The plain truth may be that the movie was only ever a movie, a fun adventure for a popular character, with no secret weight inside it at all.
The night before all of it, the reason he was in that part of the country at all was an ordinary good thing. He had gone back to the art school in Rhode Island where he had once been a student, invited to stand up and speak to the people there as someone who had made good. He gave his talk. He was the guest of honor that evening, the success story, the one they wanted their students to grow up into. And then he went out with the staff to celebrate afterward, and the celebrating ran long, and the drinks added up, and that simple, happy night became one half of the reason he is still breathing. A man does not usually think of an evening of toasts and good feeling as the thing that saved his life. For him, it turned out to be exactly that. In the years since, he has told the story many times, in interviews and on stages, whenever someone asks him about it. And in the way he tells it, there is no fate in it anywhere, no grand plan, no hand reaching down to pull him off that plane because he still had work left to do. There is only the hangover, the wrong time printed on the paper, and the gate that had already closed when he reached it. He points every single time to those same small and ordinary things, a slow morning and a piece of bad luck the night before, turning quietly into the only good luck that ever truly mattered. And the flight he missed did not slip away quietly into history. It became the first strike, the one the whole world watched over and over for years afterward. His empty seat was on the plane that started everything. But this case sits differently from the others, and that is what makes it stay with people. The first three theories all live or die on argument. Maybe the family is dead, and maybe it is not. Maybe the town is a waiting place past life, and maybe it is just a cartoon. Those can be debated forever. This one cannot. The frightening part of the story is completely, undeniably real. A man truly was booked on the first plane that struck the towers. A hangover and a typo truly were the only things that kept him off it, and every single thing that came after, every episode, every joke, every voice he gave those characters, every other theory people have ever spun about his show, all of it rests on top of one ordinary September morning that came within minutes of never letting him reach it. The whole bright, noisy world of Quahog exists because a slip of paper had the wrong number on it. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The wish that runs through that movie, the wish to reach back into the past and snatch someone out of death's path before it closes around them, did not stay locked inside a single film. It did not stay a private thing the creator buried in a story about a baby. The show itself, years later, reached back through time on screen to save the one character its audience could not bear to lose. And a quiet theory says that the one who came back through that machine, the one who took his old seat at the table and went on living as if nothing had changed, was never truly the same soul who died. The familiar face returned. Whether the dog behind it did is another question entirely. Section 5. The dog who came back. Wrong. Of everyone in the Griffin house, Brian is the one the audience loves most. He is the family dog, but he is also so much more than that. He talks
talks like a person in full, clear sentences. He drinks at the bar. He writes books that never quite get finished. He thinks harder than anyone else in the house and worries about things the others never notice. And above all, he is the friend. He is the one Stewie travels with, argues with, leans on. The bond between the talking dog and the talking baby is the warmest thing the show has. The quiet heart underneath all the noise. To lose Brian would be to lose the part of the show people hold closest. The show took him away. It happened in an episode where, early on, Brian does something that seems small at the time. Stewie has built a time machine, and he has been using it carelessly, breaking the rules of how time should be touched. Brian, fed up and worried, destroys the parts of that machine. He tears it apart so the baby cannot keep playing with the past and the future like toys. The moment passes as a normal bit of the story. Hold on to it, because it turns out to matter more than anything else in the whole episode. Later, the family is outside on an ordinary day. Brian and Stewie are in the street playing hockey, the kind of small, happy scene the show fills its time with. A car comes. It is fast, and it is too late for anyone to do anything, and it strikes Brian.
The hit is bad. He is hurt in a way that a body does not walk away from. The family rushes him to the animal doctor, frantic, hoping, but the harm is too deep. Brian dies there, on the table, with the people who love him gathered around him, watching the one they could not imagine losing slip away. The show did not play it for a laugh. There was no joke waiting at the end, no quick reset, no wink to say none of it counted. The grief was slow and heavy and real. Peter wept. Stewie, who had spent years pretending he was too clever and too cold to need anyone, broke apart over the loss of his best friend. For once, the loudest, silliest show on television went completely quiet and let a death simply hurt. In the days that followed inside the story, the family did what grieving families sometimes do. They tried to fill the empty space. They got a new dog, a tough-talking one named Vinny, voiced by an actor well known for playing a hard-edged man on a famous show about the mob. Vinny moved into the house and took the open seat and did his best to be a friend to a family that was still aching. He was not a bad dog. He was just not Brian. And for a stretch of episodes, the show held its ground and acted like the loss was permanent, like the friend was truly gone and was not coming back, like the family would simply have to learn to live with the hole he left. Out in the real world, people did not handle it well at all. The reaction was enormous. Viewers were heartbroken and furious over the death of a cartoon dog, grieving him the way a person grieves something real. A petition went up online, begging the show to bring him back, and it gathered more than 100,000 names. Well past that, person after person signing their wish to undo what the show had done. The man who created the series later admitted that the size of the anger caught him off guard. He had expected a small stir. What he got was a wave. The grief on the screen had reached out and become grief in living rooms everywhere. Then, 2 episodes later, around Christmas, the show gave the people what they wanted. Stewie is out at the mall when he runs into another version of himself. This other Stewie is from an earlier point in time, a past self who still carries a working time machine, the kind of thing that can exist in a show where the past and present brush up against each other. And this is the moment that detail from before pays off. The present Stewie cannot fix anything on his own because his own time machine was destroyed. Brian tore it apart with his own paws back at the start before the accident ever happened. The only reason a rescue is even possible is that a different Stewie from a different stretch of time happens to be standing there holding a machine that still works. The present Stewie takes that machine. He goes back to the day of the accident. He reaches the street before the car does, and he stops it, pulling his friend out of the path of the thing that killed him. The day is rewritten. The hit never lands. And just like that, Brian is alive again, back in the house, back in his seat at the table, as if death had simply been erased and the family had never lost him at all. A happy ending. The friend returned, the grief undone. But sit with how the rescue actually worked, because that is where this stops being a happy ending and becomes something colder. The present Stewie, the one who belonged to this exact family in this exact world, had lost his power to fix things. His machine was gone, broken by the very dog he wanted to save. He did not pull Brian back using his own tools from inside his own world. He could only do it by borrowing a machine that came from somewhere else, from another version of himself, from a different thread of time running alongside this one. The dog was saved with a tool from another world. And that is the seed of the theory. If the only path back ran through a different timeline, through a machine that did not belong to this family's own reality, then a quiet and uncomfortable question opens
comes up. Is the Brian who came back truly the same Brian who died? The original Brian, the one this family raised and loved, died on that table, in this world, for real. The dog who returned was pulled out of a rewritten chain of events, using a device from a different version of existence. By this reading, the creature now lying by the fireplace and riding in the car and trading words with Stewie is not quite the friend they buried. He is a copy, a version, a Brian from a slightly different thread of reality, slipped into the empty seat, wearing the same fur, carrying the same memories, sounding the same in every way, and not one member of the family has any idea. They got a dog back. There is a real question whether they got their dog back. The part that turns this from clever to genuinely unsettling is that the family will never know. They grieved him completely. They got him back, and then they simply went on with their lives, never once stopping to wonder whether the dog who returned is the same soul who left. Every gentle moment Brian has shared with them since, every late night talk with Stewie, every ordinary morning at the table could be a stranger quietly living a dead friend's life, and there would be no way to catch it. A copy pulled back this way would hold every memory the first one held. He would feel like Brian, talk like Brian, love them like Brian, remember every shared year down to the smallest detail. The only thing separating him from the original is the door he came through, a door from another world that none of them saw open. From the inside, a perfect replacement and the real thing look exactly alike. That is the whole horror of it. There is no test. There is only trust, and trust cannot see the difference. The honest truth needs saying here too. The people who make the show never said the returned Brian is a different dog. By the show's own telling, the time travel simply reached back and undid the accident, and the real Brian, the one and only Brian, was saved. A clean rescue, a true happy ending with no catch hidden inside it. The creator has explained that Brian's death was meant as a lesson, a reminder to hold the ones you love close because they can be gone in an instant, and that the return was the show choosing to listen to a heartbroken audience. That plain and warm explanation is the real one, almost certainly. No one behind the scenes was trying to swap in a stranger, yet the theory will not die because the show built every brick of it with its own hands and left them sitting in plain view. The time machine really was destroyed first by Brian himself. The rescue really did depend on a machine from a different version of Stewie, from a different line of time. Those are not things fans dreamed up. They are events the show put on the screen, in that exact order, on purpose, for the story to work. And once a person notices that the only road back to Brian ran straight through another world, it becomes very hard to look at the dog at the table and feel completely sure who is looking back. The pattern underneath all of this keeps tightening. Again and again, the show seems to whisper the same question in a different shape each time. Is the family real or imagined by a broken man? Is the world real or dreamed by a baby? Is the town a real town or a waiting place past the end of living? And now, is the friend who came home really the friend who left or a quiet stranger who slipped into his life? The cheerful cartoon keeps circling the same dark idea that the people we are watching may not be who they appear to be. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The rescue that brought Brian home only worked for one reason. Other versions of this world exist, real and close, sitting side by side near enough to reach into. A whole separate timeline was right there, holding a working time machine, ready to be borrowed. And the show would go on to prove, right on the screen, in full color, just how many of those other worlds are stacked up next to the one the family lives in. Which leads straight into a theory that takes that idea and turns it on the entire series. The thought that maybe the audience already crossed over, long ago, out of the warm, familiar quahog they fell in love with, and into a meaner, colder one that only looks the same, and that the moment they slipped through the door, not a single person noticed it happen. Section 6. The world that got meaner. People who have watched Family Guy for a long time tend to share a strange, hard-to-explain feeling. They feel that somewhere along the way, the show changed into a different show while keeping the same name, the same family, the same house, the same town. The early years and the later years do not feel like the same place. They feel like two shows wearing the same skin. Most fans cannot point to the exact moment it happened. They only know that the warm thing they fell in love with slowly turned into something colder, and they cannot quite say when the warmth left. The change is real, and it is easy to lay out. In the early years, Peter was a dim man, foolish and clumsy, but underneath it all, he loved his family. He meant well, even when he ruined everything. Over time, he turned into something louder and dumber and far crueler. A man who hurts people on purpose, who does selfish and ugly things and laughs about them, who seems to have lost the soft center he started with. Lois followed him them into that colder place, growing sharper and meaner than the patient mother she once was. The way the whole family treats Meg shifted too. In the beginning, it was ordinary, the kind of teasing that happens between brothers and sisters and tired parents. Later, it became something genuinely nasty. The entire household piling on one girl, shutting her out, putting her down again and again, as if cruelty toward her had become a habit no one could break. The jokes got darker. The situations got more shocking. The little flashes of kindness that used to slip through the cracks got harder and harder to find. A town that once felt warm started to feel like it had teeth. There is a real reason this happened, out in the waking world, and it is no secret.
The show was actually canceled. After its first few years on the air, the network decided it was not worth keeping, and they pulled it off the schedule around the year 2002. For most shows, that would have been the end, but something rare happened next. The show would not stay dead. People kept buying the box sets of old episodes in huge numbers, and crowds kept watching the reruns late at night, and the network looked at all that and changed its mind. Around 2005, Family Guy came back from the grave and returned to the air. So there is a clean line running through the middle of the show's life. There is the version before it was canceled and the version after it came back. And a great many viewers feel, deep down, that the version that came back is meaner than the one that left. The ordinary mind explains that gap with time and change. A theory explains it with something far stranger. The theory says the meaner show is not the same world at all.
It says the audience has been watching a different version of Quahog, a darker one, and that they crossed over into it without ever being told. This sounds impossible until the show's own rules are remembered, because the show proved, on the screen, in full color, that other versions of its world exist. In an episode called Road to the Multiverse, the baby and the dog get hold of a device that lets them jump from one world to another, and they travel through world after world after world, each one a different version of their own. They visit a world where everyone is polite and clean and gentle, like a sweet old storybook. They visit a world run entirely by dogs, where the dogs are the masters and the people are the pets. They pass through one strange version after another, each one only a little bit different from the last, and every single one of them is shown to be real. The show was clear about it. There is not one Quahog sitting alone in the dark. There are countless Quahogs, an endless stack of them, each one slightly off from the one beside it, all of them existing at the same time, all of them real. Once that idea is on the table, the theory writes itself. If so many versions of the world exist, side by side, close enough that a small machine can carry someone between them in a heartbeat, then who is to say the audience has been parked in the same one this whole time? Maybe, somewhere along the way, perhaps right around the cancellation and the strange return that followed it, the show quietly slid out of the warm first world and into one of the meaner ones waiting next door. And maybe it simply never said a word about the crossing. The family still looks the same. The house has the same furniture, the town has the same streets, but the people living inside it are crueler, colder, sharper around the edges, because by this reading, they are not the same people at all. They are the versions from a darker world, standing in for the ones the audience knew. The frightening part is how easy it would be to miss the moment of crossing. A world sitting right next door would look almost exactly like the one before it. The difference would be small enough that the eye would slide right over it, a shade darker, a touch colder, nothing a person could catch in any single scene. The only thing that would ever give it away is a slow, creeping feeling. The sense that the people you used to love have gotten worse, that the warmth has been draining out of them little by little, that something is wrong, and you cannot put your finger on what. And that uneasy feeling is exactly the thing longtime fans describe when they talk about the show. By this theory, that feeling is not their imagination. It is the true and correct sense of a person who has wandered, without knowing it, into a world that was never the one they began in. There is one more turn that makes it worse. In this darker world, the family does not know either. They carry no memory of a kinder version of themselves. They have never met the gentler Peter, the softer Lois, the household that did not gang up on its own daughter. They simply are who they are, loud and mean and careless, with no sense at all that a warmer version of them exists one short step away. So no one inside can be warned, no one can cross back, and the original family, the warm one the audience first loved, would still be out there somewhere, alive and untouched in their own quiet world, going about their gentler lives, while everyone watching slowly forgets they ever existed and grows used to the colder copies who took their place. The honest truth, as always, runs the other way. The people who make Family Guy have never said the revived show is a different universe. The real reason the show changed is ordinary and widely understood. Many years went by. The writers came and went.
What audiences laughed at shifted over time. Any show that stays on the air for decades drifts away from where it started, and the people in it tend to get pushed toward bigger, louder, more extreme versions of themselves, because extremes are simply easier to build jokes around than quiet, balanced, gentle characters. The multiverse episode was made as a fun adventure for two beloved characters, a chance to show off wild new worlds, not as a buried confession that the audience had been secretly moved into a darker one. That plain explanation is the real one. The show got meaner because shows get meaner. But the theory holds on, the way all the strong ones do, because the show handed it every tool it needed. The change in tone is real and plain to feel, and almost any longtime viewer will admit to feeling it. The cancellation and the strange return really did cut the show's life into a clear before and a clear after. And the show really did prove, with its own episode, in front of everyone, that an endless number of darker and lighter versions of its world exist all at once. Set those true things in a row, and the theory does not need anyone to invent a single piece of it. The other worlds were not dreamed up by fans. The show put them on the screen first. So the same quiet question keeps coming back around, wearing yet another mask. The cheerful cartoon keeps asking, over and over, whether what people are watching is truly the thing they believe it to be. A family that might live only inside a grieving man's head. A baby who might be dreaming the whole thing. A town that might sit just past the edge of life. A friend who might have come back as a stranger. And now, an entire world that might have been swapped out from under everyone while they sat on the couch and noticed nothing but a faint chill where the warmth used to be.
Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The multiverse theory blames the darkness on a single sideways step, a quiet slip out of one world and into a colder one standing beside it. But there is a rival idea that refuses that explanation completely. It says nothing ever stepped sideways. The world did not move an inch. It stayed exactly where it always was. It simply ended. And the proof, the people who believe it insist, is buried inside one bizarre early episode. An episode where the show already pulled back the curtain and showed the entire world destroyed, the sky burned, the family wandering the ruins, before it grinned and told everyone watching to please forget the whole thing had ever happened. Section 7. The end they told us to forget. To understand the next theory, the fear it was built on has to be felt first, because that fear was real, and it gripped much of the world all at once. As the year 1999 came to a close and the year 2000 approached, a strange dread settled over a lot of people. The worry had a simple root. For a long time, the computers that ran the modern world had been built to keep track of years using only the last two numbers. The year 1999 was stored in their memory as just 99. When the clocks rolled over to the year 2000, those machines would see 00, and a great many people feared the computers would read it as the year 1900 instead, get hopelessly confused, and break down all at once. And since computers by then ran almost everything, the power grids, the banks, the planes, and the machines that controlled the world's most dangerous weapons, the fear was that the confusion could spread into a disaster nobody could stop. It was on the news. It was in living rooms. People stocked up on food and water and waited for midnight with their breath held. Into the middle of that real fear, while it was still fresh and everywhere, the show dropped an early episode named Da Boom. It came out when Family Guy was still young, only in its second year, long before it became the giant it is now. And it took the fear gripping the world and ran straight to the worst possible ending. In the episode, Peter gets a warning that the turn of the year is going to bring the end of everything. He believes it, and he drags his family into getting ready, storing supplies, bracing for the worst, sure that midnight will bring ruin. Most of the household thinks he has lost his mind. And then midnight comes. The lights go out, and the worst truly does happen. The machines fail, the weapons fly, and nuclear fire falls on the world. The cheerful little cartoon, barely a year old, showed the actual end of the world in flame and shadow. The Griffins live through it because Peter had prepared, and they climb out afterward into a world that is gone. Everything is gray and broken and empty. The towns are rubble. The land is poisoned and dead. The family wanders through the ruins of everything they knew, trying to survive in a wasteland that used to be their home. After a while, they manage to build a small new place of their own, a tiny settlement scratched together out of the wreckage, an attempt to start the world over from nothing. And as they struggle through this ruined land, something terrible begins to happen to the baby. The poisoned, broken world starts to change Stewie. Over the course of the episode, he slowly stops being being a baby at all. He twists and grows and turns into a monster, sprouting strange limbs, becoming a creature that is no longer a child. The show, in its second year, walked its audience through the destruction of the entire world and the warping of a baby into something inhuman. And then, right at the end, after showing all of that, the episode pulled a trick on everyone watching. It revealed that none of it had been real. The whole thing, the fire, the wasteland, the monster, every bit of it had only been a dream. The reveal was a wink at a famous old television moment, an episode of another show from years before that had once wiped away a huge stretch of its own story by waking a character up and saying it had all been imagined. Da Boom did the same thing, on purpose, as a joke. It told its audience, with a grin, that the end of the world had never come, that it had all been a dream, and that everyone should simply let it go and move on as though it had never been shown. A certain group of viewers refuses to let it go. Their theory takes the episode and flips it inside out. They say the dream ending was the lie, and the end of the world was the truth. By this reading, the world of Family Guy really did burn that night, exactly as the episode showed, and the dream reveal was nothing more than a blanket thrown over the horror, a soft little joke laid on top of the ashes, so that no one, not the audience and not the family, would ever have to keep looking at what really happened. And every bright, silly, normal episode that has aired in all the years since is the family living on inside the ruins, or imagining a normal life among the wreckage, telling themselves a gentle story because the real one is too much to hold. This is the same shape as the very first theory in this whole list, the idea of a world built inside a mind to keep a horror out. But this version comes with a trigger and a date. The first theory said Peter built the family in his head out of grief over a car crash that took his children. This one says the whole family built a fake normal life out of pure denial over the night the world ended around them. Two different comforting stories, two different disasters buried underneath, the same desperate human trick of refusing to see the thing that is too painful to see. It also lines up against the theory that came right before it, the one about the show getting meaner over the years. That theory blamed the darkness on the audience crossing into a colder world next door. This theory offers a rival answer to the very same puzzle. The show did not get darker because anyone crossed anywhere, it says. The show got darker because the family is slowly slipping. The pretend normal life they built over the ruins is wearing thin with each passing year. The cracks are starting to show. The cruelty that has crept into the characters, the coldness, the sharp edges, all of it is the truth of the dead world leaking back up through the comforting story they laid on top of it. The denial cannot hold forever, and what is bleeding through the cracks is the wasteland they have been refusing to see. The creepy heart of this theory is the way it poisons every happy scene. Under it, a silly, cheerful moment is no longer just a silly, cheerful moment. It is a picture of people in the deepest kind of denial, sitting in the ruins of a destroyed world and insisting to one another that everything is fine. The brighter the laughter, the deeper the lie underneath it. And the baby, the bright, clever little genius the show presents Stewie as, would be the biggest lie of all. The image the family clings to, so they never have to face the monster the poisoned world really turned him into. They keep him in their minds as a tiny mastermind because the truth, the creature crawling around the ashes, is the one thing none of them can bear to look at. The plain and honest truth pulls hard the other way, and it should be said clearly. The people who make the show never said the end of the world was real and the dream was fake. The real explanation is the simple opposite of the theory. Da Boom was a comedy episode that took a fear sitting in everyone's living room and pushed it to the most absurd, extreme place it could reach, purely for laughs, and then capped it off with a joke that poked fun at a famous old dream twist from television history. The dream ending was the punchline. It was the whole point. Nothing in the episode was ever meant to be carried forward as something that truly happened in the show's world. It was a wild, standalone story, sealed off and erased on purpose, the way a comedy erases a what if it never intended to keep. That ordinary explanation is the real one, but the theory holds on anyway, because the episode genuinely happened and genuinely showed all of it. The world really was destroyed on the screen, in front of everyone, early in the show's life. The baby really did turn into a monster, and the show really did, with a grin, tell its whole audience to forget what they had just seen. Those pieces are real, and they are enough. Enough for a frightened mind, alone and awake at midnight, to wonder whether the wink at the end was hiding something, whether the show, before it learned to be careful, slipped up just once and showed everyone the true ending of this world, only to catch itself and quickly take it back, hoping no one would hold on to what they saw. And so the same question circles around again. again, wearing one more face. The cheerful cartoon keeps quietly asking whether the thing being watched is real, and whether it is what it appears to be. A family that might live only in a grieving mind, a baby who might be dreaming the whole world, a town that might sit just past the edge of death, a friend who might have returned as a stranger, a world that might have been quietly swapped for a darker one, and now a normal, happy life that might be nothing more than a story, whispered over the ashes of a world that already burned to nothing. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Every one of these theories reaches for the same kind of target, the big shape of everything. Whose mind holds the world? Which world it really is? Whether the world even still exists? They aim high and wide at the universe itself. But the single most disturbing thing in all of Family Guy may not be a question about the universe at all. It may be a question about one person, a man who lives right next door to the family, who greets everyone with a wide, friendly grin and a cheerful little catchphrase, the kind of neighbor the show serves up again and again as a harmless laugh. And yet, shown plainly on the screen, over and over, across years of episodes, that smiling man has a record, a long one. The kind of record that, if anyone in the town were truly paying attention, would have ended with him taken away in handcuffs a very long time ago. Section 8. The Monster Next Door. Every long-running show has a side character the audience is simply happy to see. The one who shows up, says their thing, gets the laugh, and brightens the room. In Quahog, one of those characters is the neighbor who lives right beside the Griffins. He is friendly. He smiles wide. He is always glad to see everyone, always ready with a wink and a cheerful little word he tosses out whenever a pretty woman walks by, his own small catchphrase that the audience has come to know by heart. For more than 20 years, people watching the show have been trained to grin the moment he appears. He is comic relief. He is a good time. He is the fun one, the buddy who livens up every scene he walks into, the kind of character a show keeps around because the audience cheers when he arrives. On paper, his life is simple enough. He lives next door to the family. He and Peter go back a long way, friends since their younger days in the Navy, where the two of them served together before settling into their quiet little street. These days, he flies planes for a living, a working pilot who carries strangers through the sky for a paycheck. He is single, he loves women, and he spends nearly every waking moment of his life chasing them. The show hands the audience a clear and harmless picture of him. He is a goofy, lovable ladies' man, a guy whose whole personality is that he really, really likes the company of women, and who turns that endless chase into an endless string of jokes. Nothing about that surface seems like it should keep anyone awake at night. He is the neighbor everyone wishes they had, the one who is always up for anything and never brings the mood down. But the show, in its own episodes, has shown a great deal more than a harmless flirt. And when the things it has actually put on the screen are gathered up and set in a row, the friendly neighbor turns into something the audience may not want to look at straight on. The frightening part of this one is that there is no theory to argue about. There is no maybe. There is no clever leap a person has to make. Everything that follows is simply what the show has chosen to depict, plainly, on purpose, over and over, for years and years, in full view of everyone watching. Start with his age, because the show itself put it on the screen. In one episode, his driver's license is shown, and that license lists him as a man in his early 60s. So this is not some young, single guy stumbling through the dating world, learning as he goes, making the ordinary mistakes of a person figuring life out. This is a man well past 60. And the show keeps that man relentlessly chasing women far, far younger than himself, pursuing them with the same hunger no matter how many years pile up behind him. A man in his 60s chasing women young enough to be his granddaughters is the cold starting point of his whole character, not the punchline. Once that age is fixed in mind, every cheerful chase he goes on takes on a darker shade, because the gap between him and the women he wants is not a small one. It is enormous, and the show never once treats that gap as the warning sign it would be in the real world. Then there is the matter of his best friend's wife. The show has shown again and again, across more years than most marriages last, that the neighbor is fixated on Lois, the wife of the man he calls his closest friend. This is not a fleeting crush the show mentions once and quietly drops. It is a steady, returning, deepening obsession that the writers come back to season after season. He keeps photographs of her. He keeps little keepsakes of hers hidden around his home, tucked away in private places, like treasures he cannot bear to part with. He watches her. He spies on her through windows. He has gone so far as to find a woman who looks like her and dress that woman in the exact same clothing Lois wears, building himself a copy of the person he cannot have. He waits with terrible patience for any crack to open in her marriage so he can slip through it and try to take her for himself. Stripped of all the jokes wrapped around it, what the show is depicting is a man stalking a woman who has never once wanted him, a woman married to the friend who trusts him most in the world, and never giving up, no matter how many times she pushes him away. The show plays every bit of it for laughs. Looked at plainly, with the laughs removed, it is the steady, patient, frightening behavior of a stalker who has been circling the same victim for decades. The pattern runs far wider than one woman. Across the whole run of the show, the neighbor is shown chasing women who have not agreed to anything, tricking them into situations, lying to them, refusing to hear or accept the word no, treating a person's unwillingness as a small obstacle to work around, rather than a hard line he must never cross. He treats other people's bodies as things he is somehow owed, things he has a right to take if he is only clever enough to get past the part where they say no. The show frames these moments as the wild, can't-help-himself antics of a lovable rascal, but the thing being shown underneath the jokes is the same thing over and over. A man who does not stop when he is told to stop. A man for whom another person's consent is a hurdle rather than a wall. And then there is the darkest thing the show has ever depicted with this character, and it has to be said plainly because it is fully canon and it is the rotten heart of why this one disturbs people so deeply. In one episode, the show built an entire story around the neighbor becoming involved in a deeply inappropriate situation with a girl who turned out to be much younger than he believed. She had lied to him about her age, telling him she was a grown woman, but she was, in truth, far younger than she claimed. When the truth came out, the police arrived at his door. He confessed to what had happened. He was arrested, and he was put on trial for the offense, a serious offense involving a young person. And the show took that and built jokes around it and ran a whole courtroom story out of it, treating a young person's suffering as the engine for an episode of comedy. The offense is not a fan theory. It is not a reading between the lines. It is an entire episode written, drawn, voiced, and aired on purpose, with the man's arrest and trial played for laughs from start to finish. The show even hints, with a wink, that what it shows is only a small piece of the whole picture. In one episode, the group of friends sit around playing a drinking game, where each person must admit to the things they have done, taking a drink for every deed on the list that applies to them. As the group calls out act after act, naming everything they can possibly think of, the neighbor quietly drinks along to nearly every single one, getting drunker and drunker as the list grows. The joke being that there is almost nothing anyone can name that he has not already done. With that one quiet scene, the show tells its audience plainly that this man's record stretches far, far past anything any single episode has ever bothered to put on screen. The episodes show the visible tip of it. The drinking game is the show admitting that the rest of it is down there in the dark, vast and unspoken, more than the writers would ever try to show. So here is the observation, laid out as plainly as it can be. By the show's own canon, by everything it has freely chosen to put on the screen across decades, this smiling neighbor is a genuinely dangerous man. He is not a clumsy, lovable flirt who means well. He is a person who stalks a woman he is obsessed with, who keeps hidden trophies of her, who builds copies of her, who ignores the word no as a matter of routine, who has committed a serious crime against the child on screen and been arrested and tried for it, and who the show itself suggests has done far more than it has ever dared to reveal. And the town around him does nothing that lasts. His friends keep inviting him to game night. He stays Peter's close and trusted friend, welcomed into the home, seated at the family table beside the children. He keeps his job flying aircraft full of passengers who have no idea who is in the cockpit. No one ever truly stops him. And the audience, week after week, keeps cheering the very moment he walks through the door with his grin and his little catchphrase. The horror here is not buried in some grand theory about the shape of the universe. It is sitting right out in the open, in plain canon, every single week, and the show has spent more than 20 years training everyone to laugh at it instead of pulling back in alarm. That is precisely what makes this one creepier, in its own quiet way, than all the grand cosmic theories that came before it. Every other idea in this whole collection asks for a leap. It asks the viewer to wonder whether the family might be dead, whether the world might be a dream, whether the town might be the afterlife, whether the world might have already ended. Each one needs an if, a maybe, a willingness to believe in something the show only hints at. This one needs nothing at all. There is no need to wonder about anything, no need to squint at clues or read between any lines. A person only has to stop laughing for a single moment and actually add up what the show has already shown them in plain sight, and a predator steps right out of the comic relief costume he has been wearing the whole time. The disguise was the laughter. The crime was always the cannon, sitting there in the open, waiting for anyone to stop and count. There is a deeper layer to this, and it is about what comedy can do to a person watching. A joke has a strange and powerful effect on the mind. It can carry a terrible thing right past someone's guard before they even notice it went by. A scene that would be unbearable to watch if it were played straight, slow, and sad and serious becomes something an audience waves through without a flinch the moment it is wrapped in a punchline and a familiar catchphrase. The brain hears the laugh coming and relaxes, and the dark thing slips through in the gap. The smiling neighbor is the clearest example in the entire show of that trick at work. The grin and the cheerful little word he says are not separate from his dark record, sitting off to the side of it. They are the very thing that lets the dark record play in living rooms all over the world without anyone recoiling. The friendliness is not the opposite of the danger. The friendliness is the camouflage that hides the danger in plain sight. A warm and cheerful coat of paint brushed over something very cold, so that the audience strokes the paint and never feels what is underneath. It is worth sitting to with how the character drifted over the years, because the show did not start him in such a dark place. In the early seasons, he was a much milder thing, a goofy flirt, a guy who liked women a little too much and got laughed at for it, closer to harmless than to monstrous. But as the years rolled on, the show kept pushing him further, into uglier and uglier territory, piling crime on crime, until the lovable flirt of the early days had hardened into the figure he is now. That slow slide is its own quiet horror. The audience did not wake up one day to a monster next door. The monster grew, joke by joke, year by year, so gradually that the people watching never marked the moment the lovable neighbor became something they should have feared and kept right on cheering him the whole way down. In a real town, a man with this record would be removed from the streets. He would be watched, charged, kept far from the people he might harm, and certainly kept far from children. In Quahog, he is a welcome guest at the dinner table. He is the close friend everyone trusts with their home and their family. He flies planes full of strangers for a living, and not a soul questions it. No one ever stops him, because in the world of the show, his crimes simply carry no lasting weight. They land, they earn a laugh, and they vanish by the start of the next episode, swept away by the same rule that wipes clean every wound and every disaster in that town. Everywhere else in the show, that no consequence rule is just a quirk of cartoons, a harmless way to keep the stories rolling forever. Here, with this one man, it becomes something genuinely frightening, because the thing that never sticks, the thing that always gets wiped away by next week, is the punishment a predator should be facing. The town's gift of endless second chances, charming when it lets Peter survive the impossible, becomes monstrous when it hands the same endless mercy to a man who has earned none of it. The honest truth needs its place here as well, the same as everywhere else. The people who make the show would say, and fairly, that he is a comedy character, an exaggeration, a cartoon drawn purely for laughs and never meant to be read as a real and serious portrait of a real and serious predator. His crimes are jokes, pushed to absurd and impossible extremes the way cartoon comedy always pushes everything past the breaking point, not a sincere attempt to show what such a person truly is or to make light of real harm. That is true. He is written to be funny. The writers are not standing behind anything he does or quietly cheering it on. The plain and likely reading of the character is that he is a gag, a running joke the show has simply carried very far past the line good sense would draw, and nothing more sinister than that. But the observation stands, because not a single piece of it had to be invented. The age is printed on his license, shown right there on the screen. The stalking of his best friend's wife is depicted openly, again and again, across the years. The arrest and trial for a crime against a child make up a whole episode, written and aired for the world to see. The wink that says there is far more hidden than what is shown is right there in the drinking game, put in by the writers with their own hands. A person does not have to believe a single theory to be disturbed by this one. They only have to look at what the show already says out loud, plainly, in full view, and has been saying for more than 20 years, while a whole audience laughs along right on cue, never once counting up the list. And so the running question of this whole list takes a sharp and ugly turn right here. Every other theory asked whether the thing the audience is watching is real. This one is unsettling for the exact opposite reason. It is the most real thing in the entire show. No grieving mind required. No dream, no afterlife, no swapped world, no apocalypse, no leap of any kind. Just a neighbor, a grin, a cheerful little word, and a record that an entire town and an entire audience has quietly agreed, year after year, not to see. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. The neighbor everyone trusts turns turned out to be hiding something terrible right out in the open, in plain canon, for anyone willing to look. But there is a member of the family itself, one who sits at that very same table every single night, who hides a question even stranger than anything the neighbor is keeping: the dog. Brian talks like a man, he thinks like a man, worries like a man, drinks like a man, and wants the exact things a lonely man wants. A dog does none of that. A dog cannot do any of that. And a quiet theory says the reason is far simpler and far more disturbing than anyone sitting at that table has ever once stopped to guess. Brian, it says, was never truly a dog to begin with. Section 9. The Man Inside the Dog. There is something about Brian that everyone who watches the show has quietly agreed to accept without ever once stopping to think about how strange it is. He is the family dog. He has fur, 4 legs, a tail, a wet nose, and a spot on the floor where he sleeps. And he does almost nothing that a dog actually does. He lives the life of a man in nearly every way that counts, and the show simply asks the audience to nod along and treat it as the most ordinary thing in the world. The strangeness has been there since the very first episode, sitting in plain sight, and familiarity has worn it smooth until no one notices it anymore. Look at the life he leads. Brian speaks in full, clear, thoughtful sentences, and he is sharper and more careful in his thinking than nearly everyone around him. He drinks, and not in a cute cartoon way where it never matters. He drinks the way a troubled grown man drinks, sitting at the bar with a glass held in his paw, drowning something, to the point that the show openly treats him as someone with a real and serious problem with alcohol. He smokes. He drives his own car around town, running his own errands like any adult. He writes, or tries to, dreaming of becoming a real and respected author someday. And he has even finished a book or two, terrible ones that no one wants, the failed work of a man who believes he has more in him than the world will admit. He once took classes at a real and famous college, sitting in lecture halls among human students, and the show jokes that he came up just short of finishing his degree. He has strong opinions about the world, about right and wrong, about how people should live, and he argues them hard at the dinner table. He reads, he worries late at night about whether his life is amounting to anything at all. He has even tried his hand at causes and campaigns, throwing himself behind things he believes in. And he dates. This may be the strangest part of all. Brian falls in love with women, human women, has had girlfriends and heartbreaks and quiet hopes, came painfully close to marriage at least once, and somewhere along the way he became a father, with a son of his own out there in the world. He grieves these relationships when they end. He carries the ache of them. Every single thing about his inner life, his hopes, his loves, his fears, his sense of failure, is the inner life of a person, not an animal. And then, every so often, the dog breaks through, and the show never lets the audience fully forget which one of the two he is underneath. In the middle of his very human life, Brian will catch sight of a ball flying through the air and lose all control of himself, bolting after it before his human mind can catch up and stop him, the man in him swallowed whole for a few seconds by the animal beneath. He is terrified of the vacuum cleaner, sent scrambling by it like any frightened pet. Now and then he is caught drinking out of the toilet, and the shame on his face afterward is the shame of a person who knows exactly how low that is. His own tail can hijack his attention and send him spinning. His leg kicks helplessly when he is scratched in the right spot. He has been shut away in a kennel, caged like the animal his body insists he is. The body keeps betraying the mind again and again. The brilliant writer who can argue politics and break a heart with a sad story is also a creature who cannot always resist a tennis ball, and the show plays that cruel little gap for laughs every chance it gets. But laughter aside, sit with the plain, hard fact of it. A dog does not write novels. A dog does not fall in love with women, or lie awake at night worrying about its future, or weep over a lost engagement, or argue about what is right and what is wrong. A dog cannot do any of that, ever, under any circumstances. So how is Brian the way he is? The show has never once explained it, not in 20 years and hundreds of episodes. It does not offer a reason, a backstory, an accident, a cause, a single line of explanation. It simply hands the audience a dog carrying the complete and aching mind of a grown man, and moves briskly on to the next joke as if there were nothing to explain. And into that empty, unexplained, gaping space, a group of fans poured a theory to fill the unbearable silence. Their idea, and this is the wildest one in this entire collection by a wide margin, is that Brian acts exactly like a human because he once was one. The theory holds that at some point in the past, a human mind, an actual, living human brain, was taken and placed inside the body of a dog, and that Brian is what came stumbling out the other side, a person living out the long, sad remainder of his days locked inside an animal's shape, carrying a full human awareness behind a dog's eyes, remembering, perhaps, what it was to walk on two legs and be seen as a man. Some who tell this theory tie it to secret experiments and hidden government work, the kind of thing done in the dark by people who answer to no one. They point to another cartoon made by the very same creator, a show where exactly this kind of thing, the swapping of minds and the placing of one being's awareness into a body that is not its own, actually exists as a real part of its world. And they note that the two shows have winked at one another more than once, dropping little hints that they might quietly share the same reality, a world where such a horror could truly be possible. Now, the honest truth has to come right away on this one, more firmly than on any theory anywhere in this collection, because this is the single idea the show supports the least of all. There is no episode where Brian is shown to have once been a human. There is no flashback, no reveal, no confession, no scar from any operation. The show has never said it. It has never built a story around it, never dropped a clear hint, never treated Brian as anything other than a dog who happens to talk and think. The brain in the dog body is not something the show is secretly telling anyone in the corners of its episodes. It is a guess, a piece of pure fan invention, reached for to plug a gap that the writers simply left wide open because a talking dog is one of the funniest and most useful ideas the show ever had, and it does not need explaining to work. The plain and almost certain truth is that Brian speaks because a talking dog made the show special, and the writers never meant a single thing deeper by it than that. This particular theory should be held very loosely, with open hands ready to let it go, because the show gives it almost nothing solid to stand on. And yet, set the wild origin story aside, the labs and the transplants and the secret government work, and there is something underneath all of this that the show genuinely does support, something far sadder and, in its own quiet way, far creepier than any experiment could ever be. Strip away the brain transplant and look only at what is plainly, undeniably true on the screen, episode after episode. Brian has the complete mind of a person. He thinks, loves, hopes, dreads, regrets, and dreams in exactly the way a man does. And that full human mind is locked inside the body of a dog. A body with a dog's hard limits, a dog's instincts that seize control of him against his will and humiliate him, and, worst of all, a dog's lifespan. That last part is where the real and lasting horror lives. A dog lives only a small fraction of the years a person is given. A man carrying Brian's mind, his plans, his half-finished books, his hopes of one day amounting to something the world would respect, would have a long and ordinary human stretch of decades stretching out ahead of him to chase all of it down. Brian does not. His body runs on a dog's clock, and that clock moves with terrible speed, racing toward an ending that will arrive while his mind is still crowded and full of everything it never got the chance to do. And he knows it. He is aware of it in the way only a person can be aware of it. The show has touched more than once on the fact that Brian is afraid of dying. He does not believe there is anything at all waiting for him on the far side. No comfort, no reunion, no second place to go. To him, the end is simply the end, a door into nothing, and it frightens him to the very center of who he is. A creature carrying a man's full understanding of death and a man's deep and helpless dread of it is sitting trapped in a body counting down on an animal's short and cruel timer. He watches the family he loves stay frozen, young, ongoing, year after year after year, none of them aging a day, while his own sand pours through the glass far faster than theirs ever will. That is a genuine, quiet horror, sitting right there in the family living room, and the show keeps drifting up to the very edge of it, and then ducking back behind a joke before anyone has to feel the full and crushing weight of what it means. There is the loneliness layered on top of it all, which may well be the heaviest part of the whole thing. Brian is utterly alone in what he is. No one else in the entire world is like him. Not one. The other dogs in the show are simply dogs, with simple, happy, empty dog minds, untroubled by any of the things that torment him. The people are simply people who will never know what it is to be trapped the way he is trapped. Brian is the only one of his kind that has ever existed or ever will. A full and feeling human mind with no other like it anywhere on earth, belonging completely to neither the world of dogs nor the world of people, welcome fully in neither. He sits at the family table as one of them, treated as a member of the household, loved, and at the very same moment, he is not one of them, and he can never truly be, no matter how much he wants it, no matter how human, Brian, his heart beats. He drinks, perhaps, because that gap is simply too wide and too deep and too painful to sit inside while sober. The heavy drinking the show serves up as a funny little character flaw becomes, under this honest reading, the sight of a creature trying with all his might to dull the unending ache of being utterly, permanently, cosmically alone. The only one of himself the world has ever bothered to make. This is exactly why that wild brain transplant theory, weak and unsupported as it is, simply refuses to lie down and die. Not because the show ever once backed it up, because it never did and never will. It survives because it feels, against all reason, like it might be true, since Brian truly does carry himself like a person who remembers having been a person. He moves through his life like someone who knows precisely what he has lost, like a man watching his old world from behind the wrong set of eyes, locked out of a life he can still picture. The theory is almost certainly wrong about every fact. There was probably never any lab, any operation, any swapped brain. But it is reaching, clumsily and in the dark, towards something that is genuinely real in the character, the unmistakable and aching sense that there is a whole human soul in there, trapped, fully aware of its cage, and quietly grieving a life it was built to long for and will never once be allowed to have. And there is one more turn of the knife when this section is set beside an earlier one. The show already killed Brian once and brought him back through a machine that reached across another world. If the loneliest reading of his life is true, that a full human mind sits trapped inside him, then his death was not the simple loss of a pet. It was the death of a person, the only one of his kind. And the thing that came back through that borrowed machine may carry all that same trapped awareness, all that same dread of the end, all that same crushing solitude, while not even being certain, deep down, that he is the same one who died. A lonely mind, locked in the wrong body, racing a short clock toward a nothing he fears, who may not even be the original at all. The show stacks one quiet horror on top of another, and then hides the whole pile behind a wagging tail. So one more time, the cheerful show turns out to be hiding something heavy in plain sight, sitting right there where no one ever bothers to look. The family that might live only in a grieving man's head, the baby who might be dreaming the entire world into being, the town that might sit just past the edge of living, the friend who might have come back as a stranger wearing a familiar face, the world that might have been quietly swapped for a colder one, the world that might have already burned down to ash, the smiling neighbor who might be a monster, and now the dog asleep by the fire, who may be carrying the loneliest mind in the whole show, a full person's heart beating away inside a body that was never built to hold it, watching a clock run out, while there is still so much left that he wanted, and so many years he will never get. The honest answer, said one last time so it is not forgotten, is that the show would call him a funny talking dog and nothing more. And that is probably the simple truth of it. But the loneliness is on the screen. The fear of death is on the screen. The human mind and the cruel short clock are both right there on the screen, in plain canon, for anyone who slows down enough to see them. And they are more than enough to make a person look at Brian, curled up and dreaming by the fire, and feel something heavy settle in the chest that no joke can quite lift back off. Before we move on, if you're enjoying this analysis, please consider subscribing. It helps the channel tremendously. Every theory up to this point has stayed inside the cartoon, or has circled back to the real man who made it. The very last one, and maybe the strangest of them all, points the other way entirely, outward, from the screen, and into the real world that everyone watching actually lives in. Because more than once, this silly little comedy about a talking dog and a foolish father has shown something on screen. A quick joke, a throwaway line about a real and famous person, a small gag about a real event, and the dark truth hiding behind those things would not become known to the rest of the world until years later, long after the show had already aired them for laughs. Enough times now that people have stopped laughing and started to wonder, with a real chill, how on earth a cartoon like this one kept seeming to know things before anyone else did. Section 10. The cartoon that seemed to know. This last idea steps all the way out of the cartoon and reaches into the real world, and the claim behind it is a big one. People have noticed that Family Guy, a loud and silly comedy, has more than once put something on the screen, a quick joke about a real and famous person that turned out to point straight at a dark truth the rest of the world would not learn for years. Not once, not by accident, a single time, several times, across the show's long life, often enough that fans stopped calling it luck and started wondering, with a cold feeling crawling up their backs, whether the show somehow knew things it had no possible way of knowing. The strongest real example, the one that set all of this talk in motion, comes from an episode that first aired in the early summer of 2005. In that episode, Brian bets Stewie that the baby does not have the nerve to take off his clothes and run through the shopping mall. Stewie, never one to back down from a dare laid out by his dog, takes the bet. He strips down completely and goes tearing through the crowded mall naked, screaming for help, shouting to everyone in earshot that he has just escaped from Kevin Spacey's basement and needs someone to save him. At the time, in 2005, that line meant nothing at all. It was simply another shocking, random Family Guy joke, the kind the show fires off by the dozen in every single episode. A famous name dropped into a strange and uncomfortable situation purely for a quick, dark laugh. Nobody watching back then thought about it twice. It came and went like 100 other jokes that week, gone by the next scene. Then, 12 years passed. In the autumn of 2017, an actor named Anthony Rapp came forward and said publicly that Kevin Spacey had made a sexual advance toward him decades earlier, back when Rapp was only 14 years old, still a child. Once Rapp broke the silence, the wall around Spacey came down. Many more people came forward with accounts of their own, a whole flood of them. Spacey lost his work, his reputation, his standing, very nearly everything he had built. And as the news spread across the world, someone remembered that strange old cartoon joke from 2005, dug up the clip, and shared it. And a cold feeling went through everyone who watched it. A goofy cartoon had tied this exact man's name to a basement and a frightened, fleeing child a full 12 years before the truth finally came out into the open. It looked, for all the world, like the show had known something the rest of the planet did not. That same old 2005 episode held a second one too, hiding in a different scene. In that very same story, Stewie, dressed up as a little girl, ends up at a strange auction where people are being bought and sold, and a real Hollywood director, named right there on the screen, bids a large sum of money to buy him. Years later, that same director was accused by a great many women of serious and ugly wrongdoing of his own. So in one single old episode, made years before any of it surfaced, the show had landed on two different powerful men, both by name, both of whom the world would eventually turn against once the truth at last caught up to them. One episode, two names, both of them, in time, proven right. And the strangeness was not limited to the cartoon alone. The man who created the show once stood on the stage of the biggest awards night in all of the movie world, years before the public knew a single thing, and made a joke at the expense of one of the most powerful men in the entire industry, a producer named Harvey Weinstein. While reading out a list of nominated actresses alongside a famous young actress beside him, he joked that those women would no longer have to pretend to be attracted to that producer. The room gave a small, uneasy laugh, the kind of laugh that does not quite know what it is laughing at, and the night rolled on. Then, years later, that same producer became the center of one of the largest abuse scandals the movie business had ever seen. A case so enormous that it cracked the whole industry open and changed it forever. The creator had said it out loud, on the biggest stage there is, to a room packed with the most famous people in the world, and cameras pointed at every seat, long before any of it became public. He later admitted he had made the joke from a place of real loathing and anger, because a friend of his had quietly told him what that producer had done to her. Pile all of those moments up, side by side, and the pattern is real and impossible to wave away. The show, and the man behind it, kept landing on the truth about powerful and dangerous men before the rest of the world had any idea such truths existed. Fans have pointed to other moments too, smaller ones, like a 2009 episode where Stewie casually tells Brian that a famous athlete named Bruce Jenner is really a woman, a beautiful and elegant one, years before Jenner came out publicly and became known to the world as Caitlyn. It is more than enough, stacked together, to make a person sit up in the dark and wonder whether something genuinely strange is going on here. Whether the cartoon has some kind of dark foresight tucked away behind all the silly jokes, some way of seeing around the corner of time at what is coming. The honest answer, given by the very people who made the show, is more grounded than any idea about seeing the future, and in its own quiet way, it is far more disturbing than any ghost story. When the creator was asked about all of this, about whether his show could somehow see ahead, he flatly and firmly turned the idea down. He said plainly that the show has no special power, no secret line to what is coming, that the notion of the cartoon being some kind of fortune-telling board that names the future is a story other people invented, not the truth. What the writers actually had was not foresight at all. It was rumors. The dark truths about these men were not buried secrets locked away inside Hollywood. They were open whispers, things that people in the industry had heard and quietly quietly passed around among themselves for years and years before any of it reached the public. There were even specific reasons behind specific jokes. The line about Spacey, one of the show's own people explained, grew out of a strange story going around at the time, about the actor claiming he had been attacked one night in a park, then changing his account to say he had tripped over his dog while walking it late at night, a story that raised eyebrows all over town.
The writers heard that and the whispers behind it and turned it into a joke. They simply took the rumors already drifting through the rooms they worked in, the open secrets everyone on the inside seemed to know, and folded them into gags. One of the show's producers put it almost exactly that way. They write down the things they hear floating around. A year or two later, those things turn up on television as jokes. And 10 years after that, the world finally finds out the things were true the whole time. Sit with what that actually means, because that is the real horror buried inside this final idea, and it is a worse one than any ghost. The cartoon was never predicting anything, it was repeating. The truth about these powerful men was already known. It was already being spoken, openly, casually, in rooms the public is never allowed to enter. For years and years on end, the insiders knew, the people at the parties knew, the agents and the assistants and the other actors knew.
The writers of a silly comedy show knew enough about it to build jokes around it and slip them onto the air. And the entire time, all those years, the public, the fans, the millions of ordinary people who bought tickets to these men's films and clapped for them at award shows and called them brilliant and handed them golden statues, knew absolutely nothing at all. The show did not have a window into the future. It had a window into a present that almost no one outside the room was ever permitted to see. The frightening thing is not that a cartoon could somehow look ahead in time. The frightening thing is how long the ugly truth sat there in plain view among those in the know, traded back and forth as gossip, and slipped into cartoon jokes for cheap laughs, while everyone on the outside was kept completely and deliberately in the dark. Because this whole long list has been about telling what is truly real from what only seems real, the most famous so-called prediction of them all has to be set straight here, since it is not real in the slightest, and the difference matters more than almost anything. In the spring of 2013, a horrible bombing struck the Boston Marathon, killing several people and wounding hundreds at the finish line on what should have been an ordinary day of celebration. Not long after the attack, a clip began spreading across the internet that appeared to show Family Guy predicting the entire thing in advance. In the clip, Peter wins the Boston Marathon by mowing down the other runners with his car, and then, moments later, dials a number on a cell phone that sets off an explosion, as though the show had quietly laid out the whole attack months before it happened. It frightened and disturbed an enormous number of people who saw it, and it spread fast. But the clip was a fake, a complete fabrication. It had been stitched together out of two entirely separate and unrelated scenes from one single episode, cut apart and rearranged on purpose to invent a connection that never existed anywhere in the real episode. One scene was a dark joke about the marathon, sitting in one storyline. A completely different scene, somewhere else in the same episode, and having nothing whatsoever to do with the first, had Peter accidentally trigger an explosion as part of an unrelated story about a friend. Someone took those two unrelated pieces and spliced them together to manufacture a prediction out of nothing at all, and a well-known peddler of false conspiracy theories then pushed the doctored clip far and wide as supposed proof that the attack had been known about ahead of time. The creator of the show called the edited clip abhorrent and said plainly that the event was a crime and a tragedy, and that his thoughts were with the victims. The network quietly pulled the real episode from its websites out of simple respect for what had happened. The truth, the whole truth, is that the show predicted absolutely nothing about Boston. A real and terrible tragedy was twisted into a fake omen by one person with a pair of editing tools and bad intentions, and it fooled a frightening number of people who never thought to check. So this final idea splits cleanly down the middle, and that split is the entire point of it. On one side sit the real, checkable, verified moments, the times the show truly did say dark and accurate things about real people years before the public knew. Not because of any magic, but because the truth was already being whispered among the people in the know while the rest of the world stayed blind. On the other side sit the fakes, the doctored clips, the manufactured omens, cooked up after the fact by people who wanted a silly cartoon to look like it could see the future. The job of anyone who actually cares about the truth, anyone who wants to walk away from all of this knowing what really happened, is to tell those those two sides apart, and the gap between them matters more than almost anything else in this entire collection. The spacey moment is real, and it is chilling for what it quietly says about how long an open secret can be kept from the public while everyone on the inside trades it like a joke. The Boston clip is a lie, and it is chilling too, in a completely different and more modern way, for how easily a simple fake built in an afternoon fooled so many frightened people into believing a cartoon had foretold a massacre. And that, in the end, is the single thread running through every theory gathered together in the dark here. Each and every one takes the same loud, crude, familiar cartoon and asks the same quiet question underneath the laughter. What is real and what only looks real? The family that might be nothing more than a grieving man's invention. The baby who might be dreaming the entire world into being. The town that might sit just past the edge of life. The friend who might have come home as a stranger. The world that might have been quietly swapped for a colder one. The world that might have already burned to ash and been papered over with denial. The smiling monster who lives right next door. The lonely human mind trapped inside the body of the family dog. And now a show that seemed to know the future, but was really only repeating secrets the powerful already knew, sitting right beside a famous prediction that was never once real at all. 10 ideas gathered here in the quiet, each one taking the brightest and silliest cartoon on television and turning it for a little while into something heavier and stranger and sadder than it has any right to be. But underneath all 10 of them, holding them together like a single dark thread pulled tight, there sits one last question that has nothing to do with any single theory standing on its own. It is the question of why this show. Out of every cartoon ever made, out of all the bright and loud and silly comedies that have ever aired, why is it Family Guy? A crude little show about a talking dog and a foolish father that keeps pulling these dark and haunted stories toward itself year after year, far more than almost any other show on Earth. And the answer to that one quiet question may turn out to be the most unsettling thing of all. If you enjoyed this video essay, make sure to subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.